What would you do if you came home from a short vacation, only to find out that someone was trying to sell your land right out from under you? Not just any land, your family's land, the place where you grew up, the only piece of earth that ever truly felt like home. For me, it wasn't just property. It was my father's legacy, a piece of history that had been in my family for generations. Every fence post, every oak tree, every inch of soil had a story. And yet, while I was away, someone had the nerve to march onto my land and try to sell it as if it were up for grabs. It started with a phone call. I was in Seattle, sitting on my friend's porch, enjoying the crisp morning air, when my phone buzzed. Walter Thompson. A good man, retired farmer, lived just down the road from me. He wasn't the type to call unless something was wrong. The moment I saw his name flash on the screen, I felt it in my gut, something was off. I answered, and Walt's voice came through, tight with urgency. "Son, you need to get back here. Now." My grip tightened around the phone. "What happened?" "There's a woman out here," Walt said. "Some real estate lady. Dressed fancy, high heels sinking in the dirt, acting like she owns the place. She's been showing folks around, telling them the land's for sale." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible." "Well, you might want to tell her that in person," Walt said. "She's already shown it to 3 different groups." I didn't need to hear another word. I booked the first flight back home. The entire plane ride, my mind raced. Who was this woman? How did she get access? What the hell was she trying to pull? There was no way this was some simple mistake. My name was on every legal document tied to that land. No one had the right to sell it but me. Yet someone was out there, right now, parading buyers across my property like it belonged to them. And I intended to put a stop to it. The drive home felt longer than it should have. My fingers drummed against the steering wheel, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. The second my tires hit the familiar dirt road leading up to my property, I felt a surge of anger boiling beneath my skin. But nothing, could have prepared me for what I saw next. A sleek silver Mercedes was parked right near my driveway, the driver's side door flung open like someone had left in a hurry. A group of well-dressed buyers stood in the middle of my field, squinting at the land as if they were already picturing where they'd build their mansions. And there she was. Karen. She stood at the center of it all, clipboard in hand, her blonde hair styled to perfection, her expensive navy blue blazer completely out of place against the dusty backdrop. She gestured dramatically at the landscape, speaking in a smooth, confident voice, like she belonged there. Like this was hers to sell. My truck rolled to a stop, and before I even put it in park, I was already throwing the door open. My boots hit the dry dirt with more force than necessary, the crunch beneath them barely audible over the steady hum of my growing fury. I took my time walking over, surveying the scene, letting the weight of my presence sink in. Karen must have sensed the shift because when she turned, her gaze locked onto mine, and for the briefest moment, I saw it, a flicker of surprise. Maybe even concern. But she recovered quickly, her expression morphing into one of polite dismissal. "Ah," she said, stepping toward me with a wide, practiced smile. "You must be the caretaker." "Caretaker." I folded my arms, staring her down. "Lady, this is my land." That got a reaction. The mask slipped for just a second before she smoothed it over again, that same infuriating confidence dripping from her voice. "Oh, I'm sure there's just been a misunderstanding," she said airily. "I was told this land was available. In fact," she lifted her clipboard, flipping a page, "I have paperwork to prove it." I didn't even blink. "Then show me." A hesitation. Brief, but it was there. Karen's fingers tightened slightly around the clipboard. Then, with a light laugh, forced, I could tell, she waved a dismissive hand. "Well, I don't have the finalized documents on me at the moment, but..." That's what I thought. My voice was calm, but there was a dangerous edge to it. One of the potential buyers, a man in a crisp suit, looked between us, frowning. Is this land not for sale? No, it is not, I said firmly, my eyes never leaving Karen's. I own this property outright. It has never been on the market. The murmurs started immediately. The well-dressed buyers shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Karen, uncertain now. Karen let out a breathy chuckle, but I could see the cracks forming in her perfect image. Oh, come on now, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. No need to get hostile. Clearly, there was a mix-up. I stepped closer, my presence looming over her. Hostile? I echoed. Lady, you trespassed onto my land while I was gone and started selling it like it was yours. That's not a mix-up. That's fraud. Her jaw tightened, but she kept the smile, forced, now. There's no need to be dramatic. I turned my gaze to the buyers, raising my voice just enough. I'd be careful who you do business with. If she's lying about ownership, what else is she lying about? That did it. One by one, the buyers started mumbling excuses, shifting awkwardly before heading toward their cars. Karen's face paled as her audience disappeared. The second the last car drove off, the mask completely dropped. Her eyes darkened, and her voice lost all its forced politeness. You're making a mistake, she hissed, stepping closer, her words low enough for only me to hear. I tilted my head. Oh, trust me. I'm about to find out who you really are. Her eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite place, anger? Amusement? A warning? Then, with a sharp exhale, she spun on her heels, stomping toward her car. Her heels clicked furiously against the dirt, a stark contrast to the image of control she had tried to maintain. She yanked open the door to her Mercedes and, without another word, sped off down the road, dust swirling in her wake. I watched her go, my fists clenched at my sides. She would be back. People like her didn't just cut their losses and walk away. They schemed. They regrouped. And they always came back with something bigger. The next morning, I stepped outside expecting to feel a sense of relief now that Karen and her so-called buyers had scattered. Instead, I felt something else entirely. A tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. Then I saw it. Nailed to my front door was a thick envelope, the bold red stamp across the front making my stomach turn. Eviction notice. For a split second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, the paper was real, the wording official, printed in the kind of government-issued font designed to intimidate. I ripped it down, scanning the document. It claimed I was illegally occupying the property and had 72 hours to vacate before law enforcement would intervene. At the bottom was what looked like an official county signature. Except I knew better. My name was on that deed. I had the original paperwork, and no court had ordered anything of the sort. This was Karen's next move. And she hadn't just left one copy for me. By the time I made it into town, I realized how deep her game went. Local businesses were whispering, giving me side eyes like I was some bankrupt fool who had lost his land overnight. A man at the hardware store muttered something about how it was a damn shame what happened. What happened? That's when it hit me. Karen had been distributing copies of the fake eviction notice around town. She wanted everyone to believe I was being forced off my own land, that my ranch was already spoken for. If she could control the narrative, she could pressure me into selling just to escape the humiliation. By the time I reached the county records office, I was fuming. The woman at the desk barely looked up as I slapped the document down in front of her. "This real?" I asked, my voice cold. She sighed, adjusted her glasses, and took her sweet time flipping through a stack of files before shaking her head. "No eviction's been processed for your property. Then someone forged it." She glanced at the paper again, this time with a little more interest. "Huh," she murmured. "Well, it's a convincing fake, I'll give them that." Convincing. That was Karen's game, make the lie big enough and people believe it. But I wasn't done. If she was pulling tricks like this, it meant she had access to inside information. Which meant someone was feeding it to her. I needed to find out who. So I set a trap. That afternoon, I dropped a rumor among the men who helped me with ranch maintenance. I told them I was planning to install electric fencing around the property. Something real expensive. Something urgent. The next morning, the county sent an inspector to check for unauthorized installations. Except I hadn't installed anything. Karen had heard about it before I even did anything. And that meant only one thing, I had a rat. It didn't take long to find out who. One of my workers, a man I'd known for years, confessed with his head hung low. Karen had offered him double his wages to leak information about what I was planning. She wanted to counter every move before I even made it. I fired him on the spot. Not just because he'd sold me out, but because he'd betrayed the land. The same land my father had built with his hands. The same land I was now fighting to keep. Karen thought she was backing me into a corner. She thought I'd crack under the pressure. She had no idea. She had just made me more determined than ever. The tension hadn't settled. If anything, it had thickened, pressing in like a storm cloud. Karen had already tried to intimidate me, humiliate me, and turn my own land against me, but when I caught her buying off one of my workers, I figured she'd finally run out of tricks. I was wrong. It was late afternoon when I saw the sheriff's truck pull up the long dirt road to my house. 2 deputies stepped out, their expressions unreadable but their body language tense. My stomach knotted. James Callahan, the taller of the two, asked. "That's me." The deputy exhaled, adjusting his belt. "We've received a report against you. A formal complaint." I folded my arms. "From who?" "Karen Adler," he said, watching my reaction closely. "She claims you assaulted her during a confrontation on your property a few days ago." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "You're joking." "No joke, sir." The deputy held up a written statement, signed in bold, looping letters. "She says you grabbed her arm, shoved her, and threatened her life." A sharp laugh left my throat. "That woman is a liar." The shorter deputy flipped through a notepad. She also provided 2 witness statements backing up her claims. That made my stomach drop. "What witnesses?" "2 individuals who say they were present when you got aggressive with her." I took a slow breath, forcing down the immediate rage clawing at my chest. I had been face to face with Karen that day, surrounded by her fake buyers, with plenty of witnesses who saw exactly what happened. Not once had I laid a hand on her. She was playing dirty. "You gotta be kidding me," I muttered. "Did you even check if these people were really there?" The deputies exchanged a glance. They had their doubts, but they had to follow procedure. "Look," the taller one said. "We're just here to let you know that if she pushes forward with charges, you could be looking at a legal fight. Restraining orders, fines, maybe even worse, depending on how hard she wants to push it." My fists clenched. That was exactly what she wanted, to tie me up in so much legal trouble that I'd be too exhausted to fight back over the land. But Karen had miscalculated one thing. I had proof. I forced myself to stay calm. "All right. Give me 5 minutes." I stepped inside, grabbed my phone, and dialed the one man I knew had been watching everything from the start. Walt Thompson. The second he picked up, I got straight to the point. "Tell me you have footage from the day Karen showed up." "Got every damn second," he confirmed. "Why?" "Because she just accused me of assault. And she's got fake witnesses backing her up." Silence. Then a low, bitter laugh. That woman really don't know when to quit, does she? No, I said, jaw tight. But she's about to find out. By the time I walked back outside, Walt was already forwarding the footage to the sheriff's office. I suggest you watch that video before you let her waste any more of your time, I told the deputies. 15 minutes later, after reviewing the footage, the sheriff himself called me back. Well, Callahan, he said, sounding thoroughly unimpressed. Looks like we've got ourselves a case of false reporting. That mean you're going after her? I asked. A pause. Unfortunately, unless we can prove she knowingly filed a false report, it's tough to get anything to stick. Of course. People like Karen always had just enough deniability to walk away unscathed. Appreciate you clearing my name, I said, voice flat. Be careful, the sheriff warned. Women like her? They don't take losing lightly. He didn't need to tell me twice. As I hung up, I looked out over my land, jaw tight, mind racing. Karen had just tried to destroy my reputation to steal what wasn't hers. And if she was willing to go that far, she wasn't done yet. This war was far from over. I woke up to the sound of engines rumbling just beyond my property line. It was early, the sky still streaked with hints of dawn, but the uneasy feeling in my gut told me exactly what was happening. I grabbed my boots, stepped outside, and sure enough, trucks were pulling onto my land. This time, it wasn't buyers. It wasn't Karen parading around in her designer heels, pretending to own the place. It was a full construction crew. Men in hard hats, stacks of wooden stakes, bright yellow, future development signs. My blood boiled at the sight. And then, like clockwork, Karen stepped out of her car. She looked smug, clipboard in hand, barking orders as if this was already a done deal. She was playing her final card. She wasn't just trying to sell the land anymore, she was trying to force a reality where she had already won. She knew if she moved fast enough, if she planted enough signs and put enough boots on the ground, she could create the illusion of ownership. Make it seem like the sale had already gone through. That way, by the time I fought back, it would be too late. Except she had underestimated me. I marched straight toward the workers, ignoring Karen completely. You guys got paperwork for this job? I asked, voice low, controlled. They hesitated. The foreman shuffled through some forms, then looked back at me. He knew something was off. You might want to double-check that, I told him. Because if you start digging so much as a single hole, you'll be trespassing on private property. I watched his confidence waver. He looked at Karen. She didn't say a word. Then I went in for the kill. Sheriff's already been notified about fraud concerning this land, I added, folding my arms. If you want to be dragged into a legal mess, be my guest. Otherwise, I suggest you pack up and go. The workers started murmuring. They knew when a job smelled rotten. One by one, they packed up their equipment. Karen's smile dropped. She turned to me, her voice sharp. You don't know what you're doing. I stared her down. No, Karen. You didn't know who you were messing with. The last truck pulled away, kicking up dust in its wake. Karen stood there alone, her entire scheme crumbling. For a long second, she just stared at me, as if trying to calculate one last move. Then, with a sharp inhale, she spun on her heels, climbed into her Mercedes, and sped off for the last time. The land was mine. It had always been mine. And now, there was no one left to challenge that. In the weeks that followed, her fraudulent claims disappeared. Real estate offices cut ties with her. The town moved on. But I never forgot. Because people like Karen don't just exist in small towns. They're everywhere. So, what would you do if someone tried to take what was rightfully yours? Would you fight back? Or would you let them win?